Story time about how my husband left me for my sister and married her 4 days later. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My husband and I have only been married for 2 years. 2 years ago, my sister and I went on vacation. A few days into our trip, we were at a bar and we met this group of guys. My husband was one of those guys. He basically flirted with us the whole time. And I could tell that he didn't know which one of us to choose. So I made it easy for him. I told him that I liked him and that I wanted him and I to go on a date. So that let my sister know that she had to back off. My sister actually ended up hooking up with one of his other friends that night. We all hung out together for the rest of the trip. I started falling in love with him really fast. When the vacation was over, my sister and I went back home. My future husband and I would basically talk on the phone every single day. A few weeks later, he even started talking about moving to my state. I really thought he was totally committing to me because he wanted to move closer to me. Fast forward a few months later, we moved in together. We got engaged and soon after we got married. My whole family was really happy for me and my sister was too. My sister ended up being my bridesmaid and everything was great. She and my fiance ended up spending a lot of time together. I mean, she was helping me plan the wedding and she was my bridesmaid, so I didn't think anything of it. Fast forward to a year later, I ended up landing a great job. This job had me traveling 2 times out of the week. My husband mostly worked from home. Because I'm such a good wife, I decided to ask my sister to go over to my house and cook for him once in a while. After a few weeks of working my new job, I decided to come home early and I didn't tell my husband. I found him with my sister in the jacuzzi. I walk into my husband and my sister sitting really close in the jacuzzi. Of course, they were both in their bathing suits. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. When they saw me, they basically jumped apart. I could tell they were startled. I stared at them without saying anything for a few seconds. I was angry. That's when my husband jumps out of the jacuzzi and comes to give me a big hug. Side note, he and I never used that jacuzzi. We basically never used it because he never wanted a table decoration, but it recorded video and sound. I put it above the fireplace in our bedroom. And I also put one in the living room. Of course, my husband didn't notice one bit. What do you know? The same day I left on a trip, my sister shows up. The baby cam alerted me when there was movement in the house. Little did they know I was recording the whole thing. Video and sound. Approximately 2 minutes after she came into the house, they started to kiss. By the way, I was on a train watching this all go down. I wanted to faint. Their faces were basically stuck to each other for 5 minutes. I see my husband and my sister full-on kissing. It's as if their faces were stuck to each other for 5 minutes. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. They look so comfortable with each other, which led me to believe that this had started a long time ago. By the way, I'm watching all of this go down through my cell phone. I had installed a baby cam before I left on my next work trip. I recorded the entire thing. I knew they would both deny it unless I had physical proof. I was so enraged, I canceled my work trip. I got on a train back home. I was only 30 minutes away from my house. And yes, I was still watching them the whole time I was going home. I jumped into an Uber and had him drop me off a block away from my house. I didn't want them to know I was nearby. I opened the front door quietly and there they were on the couch, still stuck together. I grabbed my sister by the hair and pulled her over the couch. With the purse that was already in my hand, I started hitting my husband. He then pinned my arms down to my sides and told me to leave the house. You heard that right, he kicked me out. Went straight to my parents' house and showed them the video. Then my dad was so angry we actually ended up going back to my house. But of course my husband didn't let us in. Then he showed me the divorce papers. He told me if I didn't sign them that he would take all of my money, because ultimately I did make more money than him. My sister was standing behind him the whole time. My dad and I left, and I don't even know how this happened, but 4 days later they were married. Sister came to my parents' house and told them the news. He fully expected them to be happy for her. He even moved into the house that I basically paid for. Still haven't been able to get all of my things out. Did I go over there and grab my things? Should I sue him? What do you guys think I should do? P.S. My sister's pregnant.
This is why you shouldn't go hunting alone at night. I'm a hunter and I like to hunt wild boar specifically. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the US. A sow can have 2 litters a year and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes with the exception of boar and coyote. I'd been saving for a year. When I got it, I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbits or owls, and the deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m. and it was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up, maybe setting up a target before I left. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw a silhouette of a small bear. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision, it's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't actually a bear, it was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was perched. And where would he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything on public lands. I was about to call out when I noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed disturbed by his movements like a squirrel or something, twitching and grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? Could he smell me? The thought terrified me. Then he did something that I still have nightmares about to this day. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it, a voice coming from that direction, a female voice. "Help! I'm lost!" There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. Part 2, why you shouldn't go hunting alone at night. The center of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. Were they lost? Was it some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine? "Help! Please, I can't walk!" the voice called out. That's when I called BS. Not only could he walk, but when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good that I mistook him for a bear. That's an effing trap. This guy's trying to lure me to him with some damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit in that moment. I took my eyes off of him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw a smile. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have been easily 150 yards away. "F off!" I screamed in that direction. He stood upright and it hit me how tall and skinny he was. Easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. I yelled out, "The next one will F you up. Go away." He stayed on all fours and this time I had my sights on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice cracked a little on the last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a couple of minutes, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line and opposite of the road. So much for not being able to walk. I couldn't keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush and I sent another round sailing high in his direction. I bolted to my truck and I wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. I reported to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone, and I never got an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about Wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen that bastard. He was so spooked that his mom had to take him home and she was really pissed. I'm not sure what that thing was, but I dodged quite a bullet that night.
Am I the asshole for selling my husband's Xbox to buy back the antique set that he sold without consent? Me, female 33, and my husband, male 31, have been struggling with money lately. I work at a hair salon while he works at a gas station, and we have minimum wages that barely pay the rent and other expenses. We don't have savings, nor do we have the ability to save money, and it's been like this for years. Recently, I found out that the antique set that my grandmother gifted me was gone. My husband sold it for $300 to buy a gaming chair for his nephew who's a recovering cancer patient. I told him the set was important to me and I wasn't willing to let it go, especially not for a gaming chair. I explained that I don't use the tea set like ever, so it just sits in the cabinet. Am I the asshole for selling my husband's Xbox to buy back the antique set that he sold without consent? He said he promised his nephew the gaming chair for beating cancer and that he would get me a new modern tea set. I refused to let go of it. The buyer said I had to pay $450, which was unfair. I sold the only thing my husband had that was worth money, which was his Xbox. Got $400 and paid off the buyer. My husband found out and went off asking how I could do this to him. I said I sold the Xbox since he was the one who gave away my antique set, so he was responsible for getting it back. He said he promised to get me a new one, and I said it was about the sentimental value. He called me childish and said that I sold the only thing keeping him entertained in these awful times.
Am I the asshole for going to my wife's favorite restaurant without her after she didn't cook for me? For the past month, I, 28 male, have worked 15 hours per day only to see that my wife, 26 female, didn't leave any dinner for me while she made her own dinner. When I asked her why, she said it's not her job to cook for me. Today was the last straw, so I got takeout from her favorite restaurant and had it at home without giving her any. She was upset and asked why I would be so petty, so I told her that it's not my job to work 15-hour shifts and pay for her food, just like she said it's not her job to cook for me. We are now married and I think we need to work on helping each other. It's not okay to be selfish. She's a stay-at-home wife and I clean and do the laundry and she does cooking and grocery shopping. So am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for refusing to do anything that my girlfriend wanted me to do during my 2 weeks off work? Me and my girlfriend have lived with each other for just under a year and we've been seeing each other for 4 years and change. Recently I earned a promotion at work and I've worked my butt off. They wouldn't actually need me for my new role for about a month and I finally decided to cash in on some of my paid time off and take off 10 days. When my girlfriend found out, she put in the first week of my time off from her job as well. I told her that I'm glad to be able to spend time with her, but I just want to hang out and do nothing for my 2 weeks off and just watch Netflix or whatever. However, she bought paint and painting supplies for us to work on the guest room together, and she also planned for us to go to the parents' cabin up north. When I found out about her plans, I told her no.